Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the last week. This week we have news on things like the GTX 1650 specs. And our biggest question to you all is, how many of you care about this video card? And that's a serious question. Please let us know in the comments. Also, AMD and Sony confirming some of the rumors from last week on 3rd generation Ryzen and Navi in the next PlayStation console. MSI clarifying a statement on Ryzen 3000 support for 300 series boards. AMD's 50th anniversary, and some rumors about Samsung and Intel potentially working together. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Gigabyte Z390 Aorus Master motherboard, which comes equipped with one of the more powerful Z390 VRMs for heavier overclocks on the new 9th gen Intel CPUs. The Aorus Master is also one of the few motherboards with a real heatsink this generation, featuring a mix of high surface area fins and looks-oriented cover blocks. Oh, and it's also got updated RGB illumination. Learn more at the link below. The first news item is the GTX 1650 specs and price. 1650 has been rumored for a while now. We noticed with the 1660 non-Ti, there wasn't that much interest in it. Most of the reviews on YouTube got about half of the views they typically get, including ours. Jay's was a bit low, and this was true for most other reviewers as well. So interest in the 1660 non-Ti, apparently not that high, but the 1650 is what we're curious about. It's supposed to be $150. In theory, it should have, based on Tech Power Up's spec sheet that they've posted in their comments section of one of their articles, should have 896 CUDA cores. It should be at 1660 or so megahertz boost, 4 gigabytes GDDR5, 128-bit interface, which would be 8 gigabit per second GDDR5 memory, and likely later there will be a TI because typically NVIDIA does this at this price class, and it's also not a full GPU. So should be 75 watts and no power connector. That's really the main thing here. It's like a 750 Ti to 1050 Ti replacement. And I guess the question is, do you care? Because we're going to review one, but the amount of interest we saw in the 1660 review was not encouraging and shows that people seem to, I don't know if people have had too much NVIDIA lately, or if it's just that it's a lower end product, so the interest is naturally less or something like that. But anyway, 1650, the rumored release date is April 23rd, based on the story online. Sony and AMD confirm 3rd generation Ryzen in their upcoming PlayStation partnership. So the PlayStation 5, as we've been calling it, is something we talked about in the last hardware news episode as well. Sony finally outlined some details about its upcoming successor to the PlayStation 4 in an interview with Wired magazine, where Mark Cerny spoke with Wired at length about the upcoming hardware solutions for the PlayStation 5. The most notable item here is, of course, Sony's continued partnership with AMD, which will see the console using a Zen 2 architecture 3rd generation Ryzen SoC boasting 8 cores and 16 threads. This is now confirmed. The new PlayStation will also get a custom variant of AMD's upcoming Navi. It should support, well, so here's where we get into the weeds a bit, but supports ray tracing and supports 8K. Does not mean plays at 8K. Certainly does not mean plays 8K with ray tracing. That's not going to happen. But I guess let's talk about that word support for a moment. Technically, just about everything out supports ray tracing. Ray tracing has been supported for decades. So supports ray tracing doesn't inherently mean anything. Real-time ray tracing is what you want to hear, if that's the buzzword you care about right now. And I mean, an RX 580 supports ray tracing. You can do it. It's not going to be fast, and it probably won't be real-time, but you can do it. And as an example, in Blender, you could do ray tracing and then just render it out over time. Now, this doesn't work for a game, so typically what people mean when they're talking about supports ray tracing for games is in real time. The next question is, how many samples are you taking, and is there any denoising applied, and what other effects or tricks are being used to optimize this? So supports ray tracing is one thing, but how well it actually does it and to what degree it can ray trace is another. Secondarily, too, technically there's a ray traced audio solution you could do. So it supports ray tracing in conjunction with Sony saying that it's interested in improving its audio setup for the PlayStation 5, which is something that Cerny confirmed as well, could indicate ray traced audio as one of the interpretations of those two statements made separately. So Either way, it's interesting here. There's kind of two perspectives that we take on this. One is either NVIDIA knew that this was a plan and preempted it with RTX, or the other one is NVIDIA has such dominance in its marketing that by introducing real-time ray tracing, making it a point of interest for people, and dominating the news cycle with it for the past couple of months now, AMD is now forced to acknowledge ray tracing as a feature when previously it wasn't really something people talked about for games. So it's either NVIDIA preempted a launch or AMD is forced to respond to NVIDIA's advancements in ray tracing, and either one of those is interesting and maybe worth a separate discussion topic. But either way, Cerny confirmed these details with Wired, so you can check the article linked in the description below if you want to see our show notes for that. But 8K ray tracing are the buzzwords, and then 8-core 16 threads for the SoC solution with a variant of Navi in it, and more to come later on that. MSI clarifies Ryzen 3000 support on the 300 series boards, sort of. So earlier this week, there's a Reddit thread, which is always a great source of news, and it talked about an MSI service rep stating that the upcoming Ryzen 3000 series processors would not work on the X370 motherboards that MSI has. This is a customer support rep. They don't really typically have insight to upcoming product roadmaps and support, so it's not really a surprise then that MSI came out later and officially said, it has come to our attention that an MSI customer support representative has regrettably misinformed an MSI customer with regards to potential support for next-gen AMD CPUs on the MSI X370 X-Power Gaming Titanium motherboard. Through this statement, we want to clarify the current situation. At this point, we are still performing extensive testing on our existing lineup of 300 and 400 series AM4 boards to verify potential compatibility for the next-gen AMD Ryzen CPUs. To be clear, our intention is to offer maximum compatibility for as many MSI products as possible. Towards the launch of the next-gen AMD CPUs, we will release a compatibility list of MSI motherboards. So, crisis averted, but the skepticism here comes because AMD's new CPUs will be higher power consumption, especially the high core count 16-core CPUs that we're expecting at some point from Ryzen 3000 series. And with that means potentially some limitations with the power design on these older motherboards that were made for the first generation Ryzen release. So these X370 boards of the past probably won't work with the highest core count Ryzen 3000 series CPUs just because of power requirements, but that doesn't mean that all 3000 series CPUs won't work on it. So we'll keep an eye out on that. And up next, TSMC's second-gen 7nm extreme ultraviolet lithography, or EUV lithography, is set for June volume production. EUV's been sort of a holy grail for lithography for a long time now, and for silicon fabrication and manufacturing. Finally, there's some spread and usage, and TSMC is among the first to implement EUV successfully despite over a decade of not being able to quite get it done. We have another video in the past, by the way, with David Cantor talking about EUV, 10nm process, struggles Intel has faced, and why EUV is important versus things like existing lithographic approaches to manufacturing silicon or things like multi-patterning, and you can check that video out. We'll put it somewhere up there in the cards if you want to see it. TSMC will be ramping its first generation 7nm EUV-based process into mass production this June, according to the new reports. TSMC's 7nm node will power chips for customers such as Apple, Qualcomm, and Huawei. Huawei Kirin 985 processors are expected to be the first chips mass-produced on TSMC's 7nm lines, with Apple's A13 processor to follow. TSMC also has plans to leverage its second-generation EUV to produce chips at an intermediary 6nm node and at 5nm, with the latter currently in risk production. So Huawei and Apple among the first to use this new manufacturing line. Next up, Samsung is readying 5nm EUV for customer sampling, and this is in similar semiconductor news to TSMC's. Not to be left out of the EUV race, Samsung is working on its own chips that are sub-10nm. The preeminent players have been Samsung and TSMC thus far, as GlobalFoundries has largely bowed out of this race, and Intel has obviously struggled. Samsung announced the addition of a 5nm process node to its foundry that's apparently far enough along to be ready for customer sampling. Samsung's 5nm FinFET process uses EUV, and like TSMC, Samsung appears to have made great strides in the realm of EUV. Samsung states that the 5nm process will port much of what was used at 7nm, IP, tools, design rules, etc., to ease migration and time to market. Samsung also notes that it has 6nm in a customer tapeout, but didn't elaborate on the designs or customers. Samsung is also expected to bring more EUV production lines into swing in the second half of this year. In commemoration of AMD's 50th anniversary coming up on May 1st, AMD was founded in 1969, it would appear that there are some celebratory anniversary edition pieces of hardware coming out. So last year, you might remember Intel released the i7-8086K, which was in limited quantities of, I don't know if we can say how many there were, but it was in like the hundreds of thousands. So limited quantities for the 8086K. An anniversary edition of its vaunted 8086 processor from ages past. AMD is now looking to do something similar with its Ryzen 7 2700X. Several online retailers have posted a placeholder for the chip, and while none of them detail specifications, it does appear that it will be bundled with the Wraith Prism LED cooler and should be listed for around $340. Sapphire, AMD's premier AIB partner, also appears to be getting in on the celebration. A listing on retailer PCDIGA indicates Sapphire will be releasing the Sapphire AMD 50th Anniversary Edition Nitro Plus Radeon RX 590 8GB video card. It's a really long name. Outside of the gold-colored aesthetic on it, I'm not going to say the whole name again. The video card will share the same specifications as its brethren, the Nitro Plus RX 590 8GB and the Nitro Plus 590 Special Edition. And lastly, Gigabyte seems to be planning a new motherboard in the form of its X470 Aorus Gaming 7 Wi-Fi for a 50th anniversary release as well. So lots of AMD stuff coming out. Most of these, like the R7 2700X, are based on, actually all of these are based on existing products. And the question just remains, what's happening to the 2700X? So for the 8086K, Intel bended a bit, and you end up with higher overclocking CPUs on average, and that made them sort of interesting to work with. So we'll keep an eye on the 2700X limited edition one, and probably buy one for testing. Hopefully these are especially binned or higher clocked, because that would make them a lot more interesting to work with. So keep an eye on our channel for coverage of that if it ends up being interesting. Origin, the best launcher in the space. If you haven't opened Origin in a while, now is probably a good time to do so, or to uninstall it. EA has patched a significant security flaw in the launcher, so seriously, if you haven't opened it in a while, actually do open it and update it. Researchers at Underdog Security found a vulnerability within Origin's URL scheme, an address using origin:// that could be used to trick users into running malicious code, or pretty much anything an attacker wanted, according to a statement to TechCrunch. The exploit could potentially have been used to either run malicious code remotely or inject malicious links or emails. John Reisberg with EA addressed the flaw and confirmed a patch, so you can actually get rid of this. Just make sure you go and patch it. And then this one might be a bit of a stretch, but the rumor mill has been running with it. Raja Koduri posted a photo in front of one of Samsung's manufacturing facilities in Korea, and as the adage in the tech world goes, whatever Raja Koduri does on Twitter is news. So what's happened now is, I guess the jump that's been made is Raja works at Intel on Xe graphics and on the future GPUs. Raja's at Samsung, ergo Samsung is making these GPUs. So it's possible. It's certainly possible. Intel has pushed some of its fabrication off to other entities recently, especially with the 14nm shortage. So this isn't an impossibility. It's also not confirmed, but it could be anything. It could be meeting with Samsung because, well, actually it couldn't be anything. It could be a limited list of things relating to memory and silicon manufacturing. But within that list, it could be anything. So it could be meeting with Samsung for memory reasons, maybe memory support on the upcoming GPU, or it could be something like fabrication, and we're not going to run any further with this story than it's already been tortured online. So let's leave that one there. You can see the Twitter post if you want. It's him standing in front of a statue, and that's enough for news in the hardware space, apparently. That's it for this one. Subscribe for more. As always, go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly, or get access to the behind-the-scenes videos. We've published a few of them there lately. You can also go to store.gamersnexus.net to pick up one of our mod mats. These are actually They are getting here within a couple of days now. So if you want to back order one, it'll ship out as soon as it gets in the door. We have medium and large coming back in stock. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.